Casey,
Yes,
I have
sir.
a question for you, man. I'm curious to your thoughts on this. So I watched a movie last month, Vampires versus the Bronx.
Yes.
It's on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
This is a vampire movie with next to no blood in it. How do you feel about vampire movies with no blood in them? Is
You know
that like a
what?
sin?
No, you know what? Because Nosferatu and Bela Lugosi's Dracula both had zero blood in them, and they are great movies. So
That's true. That's
I
true.
think it's okay. But in this day and age, maybe it's a little bit of a
Because
problem.
conceptually, like if it's if it's an old movie, if it's a Disney Channel movie, if it's PG or lower, obviously, yeah, fine. If it's a TV spot on a Married with Children or Roseanne, whatever, you can have a vampire, you can have Dracula. Blood doesn't necessarily need to be there. But in this movie, which is clearly they're borrowing a lot from Lost Boys. Mm-hmm. Including like a big twist in Lost Boys, which if you've seen Lost Boys, you know what I'm talking about. Fortunately, they don't draw it out as much in Lost Boys because it's done much better in Lost Boys, but they like give this twist away like it's very obvious that's where it's going.
Right.
In Lost Boys, it works very well. Anyway, so yeah, this film, the cast, the kids that enter are likable. It's clearly a Lost Boys, Stranger Things kind of vibe. The kids watch Blade at one point. It's about like gentrification in this neighborhood in the Bronx, and these vampires have like this real estate like front that they're like moving into this neighborhood, and they keep buying different properties. And the like main gag of it is that they're taking over this local kind of liquor store that the kids always frequent and are friends with the owner. And so that's kind of the problem is. There's when the vampires are killed in this movie, they just kind of disintegrate. There's like one scene where there's going to be like a showdown with these vampire dudes and this like gang of guys, and it just cuts away and you don't see anything that happens. It's just the vampires, you just assume.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
You're waiting most of this movie for like some action, and then it just cuts away from the scene and you just assume that the vampires win. And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, this is PG-13. You can show more than that. So it's
You know what, Zach? Automatic 2-star deduction.
If you're doing that, you have to have a little blood. Like, I don't know. It was just kind of weird to me. But that's Vampires vs. the Bronx. So in short, you don't need to have blood in a vampire movie, I guess. But this day and age, it's kind of... If you're PG-13 and up, I say you need to have a little blood. That's where I draw the line. If you're PG and below, if you came out in like the 1950s and older, you're good. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's one of those weird things, man. It's I guess it depends on the movie,
Yeah, I'm 50-50 on like the latest amount of vampire movies that have been coming out have been kind of shitty. Like I feel like somebody needs to go back to some old school roots and tell a real vampire story because they just haven't been cutting it lately.
Yeah, it's not like I'm a gore hound. I mean, I love good practical effects, but like with a vampire movie, blood is such like a thing with vampires, so it's weird when there's
it's like water for them. Are you not going to show water in a movie about people?
There, I think, is like one pool of blood in the distance, like that pretty much just looked like freaking water from what I recall in this movie.
God damn it.
Anyway.
God damn it.
Everybody, welcome to another Miserable podcast. As you could probably tell from that cold open, we are missing one of the Musketeers today. Kris is off doing important things, directing a short film. And
yeah,
I hope that's going well, man. I hope that is going well, buddy. But he'll be back with us next time. But I am joined by my partner in crime, the great Lucha Gringo, Professor Casey.
What's up, homies? I watched a lot of stuff this week. I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm not going to necessarily say anything's recommended, but we're going to talk. We're going to talk it out.
And my name is Zach. For those of you who are just tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. We do lots of different things here on Another Miserable Podcast. We do retrospectives. We'll do theme shows where we talk about Dracula. We'll do special holiday episodes. We kind of like to keep it interesting. We don't generally just dedicate one episode to like one movie, which is probably because we don't have the attention span for that. But we like to cover as much as we can, and this is going to be another sort of review kind of roundup show because lots of releases came out. So there's lots to catch up on. So we will get into that. Before we do, I do want to just say, obviously, the last week I think has been kind of anxious for everybody with the election looming. It's been a tricky year to review horror movies when reality is so like unspeakably awful, and it really has been up to this point, particularly this last year. It's when society potentially on the brink of collapse. With all that in the background, the escapism, the thrill that's provided by a horror movie, it kind of loses its effect, and I think
for me, it's comfort.
Well, no, not for us. That's what I was going to say. So I think for a lot of people, it's just been hard to kind of be scared or want to be scared when reality is so frightening. And like you were saying, obviously it depends on the person. For us, we're lifelong horror fans. Horror movies are comfort food.
And plus, not being able to go to movie theaters compounds that issue.
Yeah. But I do think for a lot of people, it's been hard in that environment. But the good news, fortunately, is that the horror of the last 4 years will soon be behind us. And I hope for the people that have had difficulty watching horror movies or being able to escape in that way, I hope it becomes easier for you. And able to enjoy them again.
Watch some Society and crank one out, and then you'll be back to normal.
Obviously, the pandemic, we still have a lot to work to do. That's far from over, but we're on the right path. And with all that being said, let's talk about some horror movies.
Yeah, dude. I watched some weird shit.
I guess it's weird because again, since the pandemic started, every episode has kind of just been like, we have a Don't Cross the Stream segment. Before the pandemic, we would have we'd see our in a regular episode of the show, we would see our theatrical movies and we'd have like a whole little musical cue and we talk about the theatrical releases. We would generally all see theatrical releases. And then we'd have Don't Cross the Streams, which was our segment where we would cover horror movies available on streaming services. Now everything is available on streaming services, even theatrical releases, really. So it's kind of, there's some exceptions, but it's tricky. So every episode is basically Don't Cross the Stream. So is this where I insert the Don't Cross the Streams musical?
I think so. So.
Welcome to Don't Cross the Streams.
That's one big Twinkie. All right. So, I did something a little different this time. I picked movies that are available on streaming out of a big movie order I did because Family Video is doing was doing a big Halloween sale to where they were like half off on some of the Vinegar Syndrome titles.
What video was this?
It's called Family Video.
That's part of Vinegar Syndrome, or is it?
No. It's a store, and they're a chain of video stores that are still in operation, but they've had to now they sell movies and they sell CBD products also because they need to stay in business. They're like, buy some movies and CBD, and I'm like, nah, you know what? I'll just stick with the movies, thanks. But I got a good deal, and so I got a bunch of Vinegar Syndrome titles, and so 2 of them that I picked are available on streaming. I also watched, but they're not 2020 movies. But to keep it current, because I know some of you weirdos only like current shit, shame on you. I did pick a 2020 documentary that's available for rental or purchase on Amazon that I really want to talk to you guys about. Because it's like, I could recommend it with an asterisk, so we got to get into that one a little bit.
You're covering like older releases with one exception, and I'm just covering a bunch of new releases, so we got our bases here.
Yeah.
Why don't you start off, man? Why don't you start off?
Okay, so, Zach, when we watched Tammy and the T-Rex...
Yes.
I went a little weird about...
The gore cut.
Yeah, the gore cut.
T-Rex.
I went a little weird about alternate universes, and
you did. That was. Yeah. I think that might be your greatest moment on this show.
I feel like the idea of living in the worst possible reality was in my mind, and it's not for 4 more years now. So, hey,
thank heavens.
Yeah, but
we're not a fan of fascism on this show, guys. I'm sorry if that upsets.
No, and we do not condone white supremacy. We can all say that as well. We denounce white supremacy. Okay, so I got a movie that feels like it's from one of those alternate universes, though. I want you to imagine the movie Get Out. Okay. Fucking masterpiece, right? Like, we can agree on that.
Absolutely.
And imagine that it's made by white people. In fact, it's so white, I don't think there's a single person of color in the cast, unless I'm forgetting someone. And it kind of sucks.
Oh,
and
gosh.
By kind of sucks, I mean it really sucks.
When you said Get Out made by white people, I was like, oh, this is not good.
and in the 80s, it's not a current movie. So I'm talking about The Immortalizer, which is a movie that came out in 1989. I think it was actually made as a ripoff of Reanimator, because the actual box art rips off Reanimator. They use very fluorescent green syringes full of stuff on people. But it's a movie about putting old people's brains in young people's bodies so that they can live forever. Okay, so...
Sounds like Get Out.
Yeah.
I mean, sounds like the twist in Get Out. It's not really what Get Out's about, but I mean, that's...
Right. But it's Get Out with no social commentary,
yes,
basically.
that's exactly.
But what also happens is they have to inject you with this serum that makes the brain connections grow back when you do something like that. But sometimes it fucks up, and it turns the people into these raving lunatic brute people. One of which is played by Zapp from American Gladiators. She's the female monster. And so you got these like big roided up looking people that are like just running around, chasing people. And this movie starts so strong because it's got the buff guys kidnapping some people, and then this cop tries to intervene and they knock him down, and then the truck that they're taking the patients away in runs over his head.
Oh,
and I'm
man.
just like, and that's when I texted you, and I'm like, dude, this movie's kind of awesome.
Yeah, you were like digging it when you initially messaged me, and then I guess it fizzled out because I didn't hear it back.
Then the rest of the 90 minutes happen after that. Because not only did they not show a crushed head, he just had some bruising on his face. They tried to use his body for one of the transplants, actually. So his head was okay after getting run over by at least a dually truck with like 8 people in it, cages in the back full of people and shit, and it didn't crush his head. Come on. I was expecting Toxic Avenger level head crushing. At the very least, the original cut of Toxic Avenger. At the most, the unrated cut with the extra head crushing, which is even better. What's rule number 1 about filmmaking, Zach? I talked about this on the last show.
Do not screw people on head crushing.
100%. Thank you. I hope Kris remembers this as he's making his movie. You don't screw people out of a crushed skull, okay? The rest of the movie is about this guy. One of the guys escapes, and he's trying to convince the police to help him, and they won't. And he gets this crazy old lady to help him. And there's all this stealth, and there's all this sneaking around. And it's the worst stealth and sneaking around you will ever see in a movie. It's like how I play Metal Gear Solid. You might as well just be walking up and shooting people in the face. It's oh God, it's worth seeing. This one here is, I would call this so bad it's good, worth a watch for that reason, but a lot of it's still kind of boring, so it's 50-50.
How are they sneaking around? What makes it so awful?
He's not even ducking, he's just kind of walking around, and he's opening doors all haphazardly and shit, and he just keeps walking into rooms, and then when he's escaping, he keeps running into rooms that only have one way in or out, and he's using that to try to escape. It's a whole thing. I get that in video games we got a little map to help us out, but Jesus Christ. And so his brother becomes one of the mutants, and he's kind of a friendly mutant that helps him a little bit. There's a subplot with the doctor and his nurse and adultery and wanting to put her head in this young girl's body, and the doctor putting his head in another one's body, and there's... The biggest gag, the biggest like payoff they have for any of this is the young person starts talking with the old person's voice. Like all of the setup, and that's the payoff, is young people talking with old lady voices. It's like it's funny for 2 seconds.
Oh man.
But it's poorly synced ADR. That's all that they did.
And really, that makes no sense.
I gotta say though, the brain surgery scenes look pretty cool, except they clearly use some kind of animal intestines for the brains, so they're not really brain shaped. Like they keep just scooping out piles of shit that don't even look like a brain.
I mean, they have the same vocal cords. I mean, I imagine like if you had a brain transplant, hypothetically, like your voice might change a bit, but like not that much. You wouldn't get the voice of the...
it makes no sense. Your throat is the same. Yeah, and yeah, it's no, it makes no sense. And yeah, I would say it's worth seeing because it's kind of like the shitty version of Get Out. And so that's kind of entertaining. But there are hundreds of other movies that you could be watching that are like rip-offs of Reanimator that are more entertaining, and that's what this was intended to be. I don't even think that this inspired Get Out in any way because I found it very hard to sit through the whole movie to be inspired by anything.
I doubt Jordan Peele saw this movie, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, he's pretty hardcore. He might have seen it, but it's hard to sit through. So maybe not the whole thing. Because I almost. I mean,
he kind of made his influences in Get Out clear. I mean, like there was Chud that was was shown in Get Out. I think obviously, I'm sure some of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers movies were up there. I forget what else was referenced in the movie,
I wish it had more Chud.
We need to talk about Bud the Chud, but that's for another day. Just the fact that exists is just amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty tremendous.
That's one of the best titles.
So Immortalizer, if you want to check it out, it's available for purchase or rent on Vudu, and only Vudu, which is weird because it's a Vinegar Syndrome release. Vudu's owned by Walmart. They're the last people I expect to be carrying Vinegar Syndrome titles because they're usually pretty fucked up.
Awesome. Okay, so I got two movies I'm very excited to talk about, and two that one of them was good, the other, meh. But do you want me to talk about one of the ones I'm really excited about, or should I save this?
I feel like maybe to balance out that one, you might want to talk about a good one.
Okay, I mean, 3 of these are good. I'm just more excited to talk about 2 of them. But, okay. So, as listeners may know, we are big fans of WNUF Halloween Special.
Fucking right.
It's a Halloween tradition for us now, as it should be for everyone that has seen that movie.
I'd say like 2 or 3 years counting now, right?
Yeah,
like around there? Yeah.
It's so good. And the writer, director Chris LaMartina and his partner, producer, co-writer Jimmy George I feel like some of the most creative, innovative voices in horror right now. Very unsung people in the horror industry. They really deserve more praise, and this movie just is adding to their resume. They also have Call Girl of Cthulhu on their resume, among other releases, which, come on, just look at that title, guys. Come on. Call Girl of Cthulhu.
Pretty tremendous,
come on. Yeah. So this is more in line with WNUF Halloween Special. It is called What Happens Next Will Scare You, and I really should have written this on my notes because I watched it. It was part of a horror festival, and so why don't you talk, Casey, about WNUF Halloween Special while I gather where I actually saw this movie.
Okay, so WNUF Halloween Special is something we've talked about a lot on the show, but for those of you that don't know, it is a pretend Halloween special where we're watching a newscast where the news crew visits a haunted house and they have paranormal investigators and they have murderers and people start getting really killed. And it's tremendous. Set in the 80s, has fake commercials, has all kinds of like fake news stories. It's probably one of the best new Halloween movies that's been released in years because as much as I love a lot of stuff that's come out lately, I wouldn't call any of them new additions to like my regular Halloween rotation. WNUF Holiday Special, as soon as I finish watching it, I'm like, I'm going to watch this every year. This is going to be a movie that makes my rotations. Because, and the reason we're talking about this a little bit is because it shares some characters with WNUF Holiday Special, right, Zach?
It does. If you are a fan of Frank Stewart, played by Paul Fahrenkopf, the lead in WNUF, he has a cameo in this film as a janitor. It's pretty awesome. Also, Claire and Louise Berger, who are the just send up of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah, the fake Warrens, basically. Yeah,
they're great. So, What Happens Next Will Scare You. It is going to be available to see shortly. For a weekend, it was one of the cool things that's happening with the coronavirus, I mean, with the coronavirus, amidst this pandemic, is that film festivals have gone virtual. And so you can pay like money, like kind of a ticket to see a screening like on your computer. And one of these festivals is called the Nightmares Film Festival Masquerade. That is where What Happens Next Will Scare You screened. And I bought a ticket, about $15. Absolutely worth it to support independent filmmaking. And I watched this movie, and you get it for like a day or something. That festival is since over, but it will be available to stream for free shortly. So I will tell you about that after I get my review here. But What Happens Next Will Scare You. It's a really original. It's not as cohesive as WNUF Halloween Special. Casey is messing around with a Jason Voorhees action figure as I'm talking. But it's not as well. I would say it's not as cohesive as WNUF Halloween Special. It is. It expands on that kind of vintage VHS style footage aesthetic that Chris LaMartina and co. like master. They really know how to recreate that look, and it combines kind of that along with recreating other types of media with a really just unique spin on the horror anthology. It's been a pretty good year for horror anthology since we did that anthology episode, because I mentioned the Mortuary Collection in our last show, which is fantastic, and you guys should also watch. But this is What Happens Next Will Scare You. So it revolves around a bunch of employees. It takes place on Halloween night, which is always a great thing for a horror movie. And it's these employees at a company called Click Click, which is basically a spoof of TMZ or BuzzFeed. I guess more BuzzFeed than TMZ, actually. BuzzFeed.
Yeah, it's BuzzFeed.
It's BuzzFeed. Yeah. So their boss there's like potential layoffs looming, and she has tasked them with putting together an article of the 13 scariest videos on the internet. And this is Halloween night, and she's not letting them go, and there's like a meeting, and they have to present these videos to her. And so that's kind of that aspect. The videos is kind of how he ties in the, that VHS retro aesthetic. Them showing some of these videos. Some of them are newer, like YouTube style videos, and some of them are older. It works really well. It's a very interesting, and it's kind of interwoven segments. Some of these, there's a series of some of these videos that people show, and there's like multiple sections. And then while that's going on, weird shit starts to happen at the office that they're in. And that's all I'm going to say, because really you should just watch this movie. The less you know going in, the better. It's a lot. I think it's not as fantastic. Clearly, using that VHS style, recreating that look, it hides their budget, and because half of the movie is not within those videos. Not that the office scenes are bad, because there's some great practical effects here, but clearly it doesn't look as, they clearly didn't have as much of a budget for that section. But it really, I really enjoyed the hell out of this. This was one of the most fun kind of sit-throughs for me, like horror movie-wise this year. Just extremely entertaining. You can just tell how much love that goes into what these guys do. They're just endlessly creative with their ideas. The videos that they show are lots of fun. And there's some things work better than others, but the final act, the finale, is fantastic, and really I love where they went with it. So that's all I'm gonna say. I really highly recommend watching this. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. If you like WNUF Halloween Special, you have to see this. They are doing a WNUF sequel. I think that's probably going to come out next year if all goes according to plan. Obviously, the pandemic delayed things, but this really deserves to be seen in its own right. It's wonderful. If you're I won't say how the like Claire and Louis Berger cameo works out. I think you should just watch it. Same with Paul Fahrenkopf, who was Frank Stewart in WNUF. Just watch it, and I think you'll enjoy how they're used. But it is going to be available as a part of something called Shocktail Hour, which I think is from what I can tell, it's a spooky film series hosted by undead dame Aurora Borealis. Great name. This is from her Facebook. So it's some sort of a kind of online kind of Elvira, I guess, sort of hosted streaming show, which is great. And that's going to be available on November 20th. So for free. So you have no excuse not to watch it. It is for free, November 20th. Hell yeah. Just follow Chris LaMartina on Twitter if you want. I retweeted his kind of announcement about it with some of my thoughts on the movie on Twitter, so you can find the link that way if that's easier for you. But definitely check it out, guys. It's going to be for free. It's one of my favorite releases this year. A lot of fun, so please seek that out. What Happens Next Will Scare You. One of the most original horror movies I've seen in a while, so highly recommend it.
Nice, because I by the way, I gave Immortalizer 2 stars. I didn't No, actually, it's a 1.5 star. It's a 1.5 star. I'm sorry. I gave this next one 2 stars. Let's just start off with that. You know, Zach, you know what movie I really didn't like that we had to watch for this show?
Oh, man, there's probably a lot of them.
Well, it was The Devil's Reign, okay?
Oh, you were so mean to that movie. It was not as bad as you were saying it.
Okay, well,
I still at least hold that the ending of that movie is awesome.
I want you to watch this movie, which is called Primeval. It's available on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And also available from Vinegar Syndrome on Blu-ray, along with a movie called Lurkers. I want you to watch this because I thought Devil's Reign was super boring except for the ending. This movie is a lot more interesting until the ending, which they steal from Devil's Reign and don't have cool, melty shit happening.
Oh, man.
Oh my god, it's like the budget ran out for the last scene. It drives me fucking crazy. So it's kind of the same story, except it happens in the city, and there's this cult that's kidnapping people, and you have to sacrifice your own family members in order to get immortality, and you get it for 13 years. So you have to keep getting family members made so that you can sacrifice them eventually, so that you can get 13 years of life. And there's these people that have been doing it for decades, you know. There's also a nun that was almost sacrificed by them, and she decides to work with the church to go undercover in this cult, and she has to renounce Jesus in front of all of them to do it. And there's like this thug guy that's not part of the cult, and I think he's supposed to be like mentally challenged or something. They said they sprung him from an insane asylum, but he seems more off than just that. They basically, what happens is they drug people, they end up naked on an altar, and usually stabbed to death. And there's a statue of a devil, but it comes to life every once in a while, and it looks like a Muppet made out of chicken, like like chicken covered with ultra slime and blood. Yeah, it looks like if you've ever gone to like a Chinese butcher and you see the rabbits hanging up, it looks like they just turned one of those into a demon or something. Yeah, it's pretty shitty looking puppet. So this movie starts off strong. Again, you got people being sacrificed, all this shit. And I'm just like, oh, this is like Devil's Reign, but so much cooler. And then they battle the cult, and there's all this stuff happening, and it's a lot more exciting. But then you get to the ending. Okay, they steal the ending from Devil's Reign completely, pretty much. It's even thunder and lightning as this shit's happening inside the church. Okay, so the nun, I'm going to spoil the end of the movie, but you've already seen Devil's Reign probably, so I'm not spoiling anything.
Go for it.
Okay, so, all right. The nun stabs one of the cultists because the mass that they're doing turns into a clothes-on orgy, and the guy starts trying to dry hump her to death, and so she stabs a guy. And then she stabs the demon, and shit just goes crazy at that point.
This sounds good so far.
Demon. Yeah, she stabs the demon, and the people start aging really fast, so they get like old age makeup because, you know, they've been like for hundreds of years killing people to extend their life. And I'm like, all right. And then they start dropping, like they're melting, and I'm like, oh shit, here it comes. Then they cut away and they just show some skeletons on the floor with some fucking robes.
Oh.
Okay, you know what? Movie rule number 2, do not screw your audience out of a melty scene either. Because melty scenes are always cool. I have not seen one melty scene that's bad. So if we have any
prospective horror directors listening, don't screw us on face explosions and explosions, and don't clue us on body meltings.
I would say, actually, I'm gonna give this a 2.5 stars because, like, until the shitty ending, it's kind of entertaining. And this is another one that you can watch and laugh. It's just that the last half of the movie's got some boring stretches in it. So it keeps your attention, but then it starts to feel like they're just stretching the runtime until the shitty climax. So I'd recommend checking it out. I wouldn't recommend getting stuck buying it like I did. probably not the best purchase, but you never know. You never know. I didn't know it was available on Amazon Prime streaming at the time, or I would have just watched it on there. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely an 80s version of The Devil's Reign, like 100%. Like they stole from that movie. Like they probably should have been sued by the creators of Devil's Reign. So Joe, our listener that recommended Devil's Reign, I ask you to check out this movie and see what you think, because if you like Devil's Reign, maybe you'll like this one too, or maybe you'll just hate this one. But they're so similar that you might like it.
All right, Joe. You heard Casey. Check out Primeval, 1988.
That is the most specific recommendation I could probably get, and I'm gonna do another very specific recommendation for my next movie, but not quite that specific.
Oh man. Okay. So I have two that I can get through fast, and then save my big one for the end, and then.
Oh, hit me with them, dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have His House. This came out. It's a new release on Shudder, directed by Remy Weeks. His directorial debut. Stars Wunmi Masaku as Riel. If you know, you probably won't recognize her name, but she has a big role on Lovecraft Country. Very good. Also, Sope Derizu as Bull, and Matt Smith, who Chris probably would have reviewed this movie if he was available.
If he knew Doctor Who was in it.
Yeah, he has. It's a lesser part, but he's good in his scenes. This is a really moving, really well plotted ghost story. It has a lot of shades of the Amityville horror. It's about these two refugees that are seeking asylum from their country. I think it's where they're coming from, Sudan. It's always something.
Oh, like Abdul the Butcher.
So they're seeking asylum from South Sudan, which is in amongst
Africa.
Has a war going on.
Okay,
and
so all I know about Sudan is Abdul the Butcher, who was really a Canadian guy. Does anyone get stabbed in the forehead with a fork in this movie?
Not with a fork. I don't.
Sometimes he used a pencil.
So they end up in England, and they are given a house. And they're like, "This is your home now. Don't fuck this up." And it's kind of it's an odd neighborhood. It's kind of like part of this like row of, I don't know like what you would call it, but like kind of
like townhomes, yeah.
Sort of,
like
yeah.
They're all connected.
Yeah. They're all connected. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's. The reason this movie works so well is it manages to tell this kind of affecting plight of these two refugees that are grappling with guilt over something, which I won't reveal because that's a spoiler. But it also delivers on the haunted house front of things. And that's something, haunted house movies nowadays, it's kind of just like different window dressing, and they kind of, I feel like a lot of them kind of don't deliver on the haunted house aspect. It's a different setup. It's a different location. Yeah. There's a different reason it's haunted.
They want to use it. Yeah, they want to use it as a metaphor for something else every single time.
And there's some of that here, but it's done well. The thing I'd like to see in haunted house movies nowadays is reinvent more creativity on like the haunted house portion. Some new effects, new monsters, I want to see more like Poltergeist style haunted house movies.
I want to see some crapparitions.
Yeah, and I feel like they just do the usual tricks. Not in this movie, but I'm saying it's just, jump scare kind of. Oh, it was,
or door opens.
Yeah, door opens, going down to the basement. Like, it's just sort of that same sort of slow burn. There's something, the walls are turning dark. I mean, here there's like, it's really like more of a haunted room because it's really one room where it's focused. There's like a hole in the wall and they keep seeing different things.
Okay, Zach, so why don't they just stay the fuck out of the room? Is there a plot reason for this? Because it's bothering me already.
I mean, because it's like the main room of the house, I guess.
Okay, I got you.
So this isn't a mansion they're in, it's a decent sized home for them, but like it's not a mansion.
Okay.
And but this does really work well on a bunch of narrative levels. There's some really fantastic cinematography. It's really beautifully shot. It's great storytelling. There's some good plot, turns, and I enjoyed it a lot. The performances are fantastic. It is pacing. Could have been a bit faster, but it wasn't. I looked at my phone a couple times, which isn't great, but I was never that bored. And there's some really cool practical makeup here, some CG, I think, but like the makeup effects, there's lots of different ghosts here. Certainly, it's as Kate, as you were mentioning, this haunting is a metaphor for certain things.
Yeah,
but,
for the stuff that they're guilty about.
But there is a kind of
right?
cool monster at the end. I don't remember if it's CG or practical effects, but it looked, even if it's CG, it looked good. So I will say His House, a very well-made movie, great debut from Remy Weeks. So yeah, nice. I definitely recommend that. I would give that 3.5 stars out of 5. It's called His House. I don't love the name.
Yeah.
But I like from the story wise, I guess I get why it's called His House. But good film, definitely very well done. So definitely check that out, guys.
Another movie. You had another one.
Another quick one, which I just didn't get to touch on because we did so many different things and had different types of shows set up. But I watched this like a month or so ago. The Babysitter, Killer Queen. So this is a sequel to The Babysitter, which I know Casey, you were a big fan of.
I love that movie. I forgot this existed.
It's not as good.
Shit.
Well, this is directed by MCG, who is known as like a music video director. At least that's how he got started. And this
he did like Supernatural. So like,
look, I didn't like the first one was fun. It was ridiculously fast paced, and there was so much shit going. This is just like that on speed. This movie moves like a mile a minute, man. You cannot keep up with what's going on. I did like, there is, similar to the first one, there is a good twist that surprised me early on, which I won't spoil.
Cool.
And I dug that.
Cool.
Like the whole cast from the first one is back, with the exception of Samara Weaving, who is back for a cameo at the end of the movie.
Okay.
So it's only like a guest spot, but she does come back.
It's like she literally made the first movie. But
like the first one, there are some fun. There's like excessive gore. There's decent effects.
Yay!
It moves so fast, and they just throw everything at the wall.
I love it. See, Mick G does that because he's a TV guy and he was a music video guy before that. That's completely fine. That's how he did Supernatural. I'm cool with it.
It just doesn't quite work. It's just kind of endless pop culture references. There's too many like flashback daydream sequences, just like over and over again. There's a faux like Matrix kind of Street Fighters like fight between two of the actresses in this movie, but it's like, that's kind of like Scary Movie did that like 20 years ago.
I
don't know.
So
and it's not
Pow Enter the Fist,
and it's not as good as in Scary Movie. So like, I don't know. There's also just a really meandering subplot with Judah Lewis, who is the main protagonist, who's great and very likable. His parents, which I don't remember his parents really being in the first movie. Certainly Ken Marino wasn't in the first movie, and he's his dad. And
no, you would remember Ken Marino.
Yeah, because Ken Marino's great. But it's too much, and it just sort of like tonally, it's sort of just...
Does he say he wants to dip his balls in anything?
There's some funny lines, but I don't remember. He kind of teams up with one of the other parents, and it's just kind of a random sort of like road trippy subplot that they cut to here and there, and it just sort of, I feel like, detracts from like this sort of the suspense where they're just being... Judah Lewis is being chased by all, the people in this cult, the teens in this cult, and it moves so fast it's hard to digest anything. They don't let scenes, there's never any moments where you're just like sitting on a shot and just holding there and just kind of taking in this moment and really emotional beats. There's not a lot of that. There's a few...
This sounds like I need this after the last two movies I just talked about.
It's fun. I'm not saying it's not fun. The problem, like the movies you mentioned, is that the third act, like the climax, makes no freaking sense at all.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not like... I get what they were going with it, but if you're watching the first movie, this climax really makes no freaking sense. It's just kind of like pretending the first movie didn't really happen. It's hard to really get into it without spoiling it, and since you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it. It just doesn't really make any sense. It's just kind of like...
God damn.
It's just like the writers sort of farted. And they were like, well, we kind of want, a certain ending, and... we don't know how to get here, so let's just like jam it into this round peg into a square hole. And
I've seen a lot of movies like that.
Yeah,
actually,
it's just kind of half baked, but there is some fun. Again, the cast is clearly having a good time. You can tell everyone enjoyed making this movie. The gore effects are great. It's just the B plot with the parents just didn't seem necessary to me, and just kind of they could have just cut that completely, honestly, and it would have been a much better film. And there's too many references. They just needed to slow down on certain moments and just pause because he's going, the first movies, he has all these different battles with the teens in this cult. And this kind of repeats that, but he has someone else with him this time. And again, it just goes so fast, and it's just too much. You need to slow down. Like I love action-packed horror movies. I like, it's nice to, not have too many. It's nice to have a fast-paced horror movie if you can make it work without.
So this was a spot fest, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it was a spot fest in wrestling terms. It's just, you have to balance it out. You have to have your slow moments, your emotional beats, your character moments, and there isn't enough of that. And it's not paced well when those moments do come. It feels off because you're just going like, it just does not stop, this movie. It just keeps going.
Are any heads crushed and or explode?
Oh, there's lots of shit like that. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, okay, then it's better than everything I've reviewed this week already.
There's lots of shit. Like I said, this is a fun movie. It just, to me, it feels like, this series feels like it wants to be Happy Death Day, but it's not as good. It's not as well written as Happy Death Day. To me, I think that franchise is, the second one of that, the second Happy Death Day which is more of like a sci-fi comedy than a horror movie, but that franchise is really well written, and it knows how to pace itself. It takes the time for the emotional beats, and it's not just, it doesn't throw like everything at you, and I think this series, if it's going to continue, I hope they kind of slow things down a bit for the third one. You can still have all this crazy stuff in it, but just not as much. You don't need the excessive B plot. You can cut down some of the random pop culture references. It's just a little too much. Please, too many daydream sequences, for the love of God. There's like way too many here.
Hack move.
Like flashback daydream sequences. Just stay in the moment. Come on. It's just trying to do too much, but it is fun. You're not going to be bored. I guarantee that. So I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. I don't think it's quite as good as the first one, because Samara Weaving is not in it, so it wasn't going to be as good as the first one. She's barely in it, I should say. So, but that is The Babysitter Killer Queen. I was probably talking fast for this review, which is ironic since it's a fast-paced movie. But I had a lot to say.
Take a breath and show an emotional moment, Zach.
I need to work on slowing down, guys. If I talk too fast sometimes, call me out. That's something I'm working on. I will slow things down. But I had a lot to say about this one, so.
Yeah, so I've got a very specific audience in mind for this, all right? I was born in 1980, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 40 years old now. I grew up renting horror movies a lot, okay? And this dude, Dustin Ferguson, made a documentary called Direct to Video, focusing on those movies that I used to rent. But I mean, like, really, really specifically, the exact movies I watched growing up. Like, I have seen every movie that is in this documentary, and they're not the most, like, well-known movies. So I found it really weird. Like, I felt like this documentary was created to speak, like, specifically to me almost. That said, oh my God, I want to love this so much more than I did.
So this director set out to go, you know what? I'm going to make a documentary for Casey. And you didn't love it?
Pretty much. And this guy's making a movie called Amityville in the Hood right now, which sounds like it's also made for me.
I have so many questions about that.
Yeah. I really want to see this movie. This didn't have a budget, and this didn't have copyright clearances, and it really hurt the film. Because what you get is a series of interviews that kind of drift out to different categories without like a title card or a break or anything. Like, oh, you're talking about full moon. Now you're talking about trauma. There's nothing in between to say this is where the break is. My mind's followed it. Not everyone's going to, because not everyone's going to recognize everyone in all of these things. But the stuff he gets is amazing. He's interviewing Lloyd Kaufman a little bit. He's interviewing Jim Wynorski. He's interviewing Fred Olen Ray. He's interviewing all these people behind like Full Moon Pictures, but they're low enough on the totem pole that they could talk shit and really tell you behind the scenes stuff instead of getting like Charles Band to kind of like tell you the way he wants to tell you. And there's all these little tidbits in there that are super interesting and not the shit you'll find in like IMDb trivia or in a director's commentary either. But there's no clips from the movies. All the guy did was use scenes from the trailers to the movies.
Aww.
And then in the credits said the trailers are included for educational purposes. No rights are claimed or given. Which I'm like, okay, if that's legal, hats off to you. I'm not sure that's really going to work. I paid $10 to buy this movie, so
where was it
money
available?
off of it. You can buy or rent it on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
It's $5 to rent, $10 to own. So I just bought
Direct
it
to
just
video?
in case I ended up. Yeah, direct to video. The cover art has the girl from Return of the Living Dead 3 on it, and that might not be what Amazon has is their picture though. But yeah, it was well done in an interview sense. Editing wise, kind of all over the place. There's not clips of movies to break up the interviews, so it's just a lot of talking heads intercut with some trailers every once in a while, but all of the stuff that's in it is fascinating. So like, if you grew up watching the same movies that I did, if interviewing Jim Wynorski and Fred Olen Ray like puts a light bulb in your head that I need to fucking see this movie, you're my people. Okay. Now, yes, they talk about Chopping Mall. Just remember that. But
Do they talk about Phantom of the Mall is the question.
They do not.
Ugh.
And if these people don't ring a bell to you and you're not into 90s B movies and 90s B movie culture, you're not going to get anything out of this because it doesn't have anything to bring in new people, and it's not like visually or like interesting enough to draw in new people. You kind of already have to know about the subject, and then you're like, okay, this shit's pretty fascinating. He's talking about stuff I haven't heard about before. But yeah, that's what I meant about having like a really specific audience for this. Like the interviews are competently done, competently shot, and there's good questions, and these people are opening up. They're like telling you all kinds of shit. Clint Howard tells you some pretty cool shit too. And they've got all kinds of people interviewed. It's just, it kind of works like a stream of consciousness. And if you're not following the exact mindset that the editor had in mind, who I think is also the director and writer, you're going to get lost a little bit along the way. Sometimes you might not even be sure what movies the guys are talking about because they're not always super clear. But as someone who's seen all of these movies, it's fascinating. They talk about Jack Frost. They talk about Ice Cream Man. They talk about Hard to Die, which is...
Did you see that Clint Howard, he dressed as Ice Cream Man this year? I don't know if you saw that picture.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
He actually said that if you can prove, like if you record yourself watching that movie all the way through in one sitting, he will give you $50. And he's like, people always say they did it, but they never proved it. And if you prove it, I will give you $50. And I gotta admit, I've seen Ice Cream Man. I kind of like the movie, but I've seen it in like 2 to 3 sittings each time I watch it. I have never watched it all the way through in one sitting. So I would not get his $50. But yeah, there's all kinds of cool stories, like how Full Moon Pictures got signed by Paramount by lying about budgets for their films. And stuff like that, which is how this documentary actually starts. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, this is going to be pretty entertaining. And it is. It just might not be for everyone. If you're newer to horror, if you're not that into the old school stuff that happened in the 90s, and which isn't really old school, but by now it is. That's like 30 years ago. You know what I mean? You're not going to get as much out of it as I did, but I liked it. I give it a solid 3 out of 5 just because I know it's not for everyone, but for me, pretty decent. But I still, even though I liked the information presented, I thought that the presentation was lacking.
And this is a new release, right? It came out this year?
Just came out this year.
Sweet.
I think it just came out in the last couple months, actually.
Casey is an expert on documentary, guys. He made his own documentary on wrestling, like SoCal wrestling scene years back.
It was on AWS Wrestling in Southern California. It's actually an unfinished documentary. I cut about 20 minutes of it because it was a school project. But yeah, my undergrad was documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, your field of study, basically.
Yeah, that was my focus. And I could recommend you some documentaries, but there's a lot of horror documentaries I would recommend before this one, unfortunately.
Well, speaking of horror documentaries that we would recommend, I have a very good one to talk about. It's been an excellent year for horror documentaries. The end of the year list is going to be interesting. It's going to be very competitive. Yeah. I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I might have to have a separate list for documentaries. I don't know.
Hey, we can do a documentary of the year if you want to do that. Yeah, that's good.
That's going to be tough, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know how much we love the Monster Squad. I've said this before. I mentioned this on Twitter. I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast if not for the Monster Squad.
And I've said this before, Zach, but give me the amulet, you bitch.
He has. I still have not given him the amulet.
I want that amulet.
You can get it one. They have them at Fright Rags. Nice little amulet pin. That's the amulet I have.
I've already given Fright Rags enough money this season, I think.
Fright Rags has been just pulling it out. All right. Anyway, let me cut this out.
You see this right here, Zach? This is one of 4 Joe Bob action figures that I've ordered from Fright Rags.
So I was fortunate enough to have a taped copy of the Monster Squad on VHS growing up. Not everyone did, and it was my introduction.
If you didn't, you were fucked.
Yeah, it was my introduction to the Universal monsters. It left an indelible mark on me. It's pretty much how I got into horror movies. It was really like one of the first horror movies I saw. And
I think either that or Killer Clowns from Outer Space is how we became friends, like talking about movies.
And Wolfman's Got Nards, the new documentary by Andre Gower, who is also the star of Monster Squad, it encapsulates everything that makes it such a special piece of cinema. It is absolutely fantastic. So let me just talk about how this documentary kind of works. It's sort of broken into different segments that are sort of, each segment is kind of transitioned with like a really awesome piece of Monster Squad art. Cool. And they interview a lot of the cast. Not everybody is interviewed. It would have been nice to see interviews with, the kid that plays Patrick and, Robbie Kiger. Tom Noonan isn't interviewed. Stan Shaw, who plays one of the detectives, isn't. Michael Fastino.
Weird because some of these people were at the thing we went to.
Some of them. I don't remember. Right. Was Robbie Kiger there? I don't remember him or Eugene being there. Really, the 3 that have always been there.
Faustino was there, though.
Was he?
He lives in Burbank. I think he was.
The 3 that have always been there and what this documentary is more central on are Andre Gower, Ryan Lambert, who was Rudy, and Ashley Banks, who was Phoebe. Like the main 3 kids outside of Horace. And so, but there are a lot of great interviews. I did not realize Michael Fastino was the younger brother of David Fastino, by the way. I just found that out.
Oh, I absolutely knew that. And, it's funny because he came into the Halloween store I worked at, and I'm just like, oh, dude, it's the guy from the Monster Squad. And I'm telling all the other workers, and I know he heard me tell someone, and kind of like looked at me weird. It was pretty funny.
That's awesome. I'm sure he doesn't get that at all, honestly. So
that guy's Bud Bundy's brother.
So what this documentary follows is there was an Alamo Draft House reunion tour with Andre Gower, Ryan Lambert, and Ashley Bank back in 2017.
Which we went to.
Squad. We went to a screening in 2015 at the theater. Yeah, but
it was a reunion with the same.
It was a reunion, but it wasn't was it Alamo Draft House? Okay.
Yeah, it was Alamo Draft House. It was just a different year.
No, it says Creature Features presented the one that we saw on the poster I have. I don't think it was Alamo Draft House sponsored.
But Alamo Draft House introduced it and then said shit about the LA one not opening.
Well, Alamo Draft House isn't mentioned on the poster. The awesome poster I have. But so it revolves around that screening. That's when a lot of the footage is filmed. So you see footage of the 3 of them going on this tour. And that's intermixed with behind the scenes shots, footage from the movie. I'm curious to see how much footage is on the special edition DVD that I have and how much is new footage. But it's intermixed with interviews from different members of the cast, Shane Black and Fred Decker. And Fred Decker's interview is by far, I think, the most captivating part of this documentary, because you can tell he's just very conflicted about this movie because he considers it his best work. He loves this movie, but it bombed completely at the box office. And the way the kind of
basically ruined his career.
Yeah, it basically it nerfed his career in a lot of ways. And so he's very conflicted about it. And the narrative of this movie is that it came out in 1987. You know, they talk about the development process with Shane Black and Fred Dekker writing it. They talk about the pre-production, production, everything that went into that, and then the release, and then the aftermath, and that is it came out. They it's this great behind the scenes and of the stories about Fred Dekker pretty much telling Phoebe that Duncan Regé is gonna say something to you and you're gonna scream, and she goes, well, when am I gonna scream? And he goes, oh, you'll know. And that's when Duncan Regé says, you bitch. And apparently the great according to the story, the first time she screamed, it was like too short because she was like absolutely terrified, and they're like, okay, you have to do it again and you have to scream longer. And there's some great interviews with Duncan Regé. I'm really glad he was included. John Grease was not included. That was disappointed that he was not interviewed. But anyway, so it gets into that, and the narrative is, so it comes out, it's released, and then it just like disappears. Nothing happens with it. And kind of the way they say that they really didn't realize this film had developed kind of a cult fandom until 2006 when the Alamo Drafthouse had their first reunion screening. And that's when they realized that it kind of had developed kind of this cult fan base. And it sort of get into whether they considered a cult movie. And Fred Dekker's like, I really don't know what you would call a cult movie. And it's interesting. Everyone has a definition of what a cult movie is. Some people say it's absolutely a cult movie because they interview, bloggers from different sites. Yeah. Like Sean Robert, who had a big part in getting the DVD released. That's a segment of the movie.
See, I don't know that I would call it a cult movie. I would call like trauma stuff a cult movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think cult movies. It depends on your definition. To a lot of people, cult movie is a very niche type of film, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show that develops a very, very rabid kind of fan base. This is just a really great 80s movie that has developed a big fan base. Right. But what do you consider that a cult movie? It's up to your personal, I guess, preference on how you define a cult movie. But that's one of the interesting kind of subjects here. But yeah, so to Fred Dekker and Andre Gower and Ryan Lambert and Ashley Bank, they really said it was like Fred Dekker describes it as like it's like shooting like a jump shot and then finding out it went in the basket like 29 years later, like 19 years later, I guess. And like, so to him, it was just a big box office bomb for the longest time and like a total failure. And then all of a sudden he found out that no, people love this movie. And it's weird. And you can just see how conflicted he is in it. And even like towards the end of the movie, he has a hard time wrapping his head around it. And it's tragic because he's such a brilliant director and writer, and it's such a fantastic movie, but you can tell like he considers it his best work. He just doesn't know how to feel about it. And that would be weird, I think that's what happens. A lot of great writers, they pass away without ever knowing that their work has become to be revered, but they never had that success when they were alive. And so fortunately he has seen some of that success, at least that people love this film. It didn't do well at the box office and it really affected his career. And it's difficult. And I totally understand that. It's interesting. They get into, there's some like really weird advertisements. But like there was some like wanted poster style advertisements for this movie, and with really funny like taglines on them. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty funny.
Were these comic book ads? Because they sound familiar.
It was like a wanted ad for like The Mummy and for Dracula, but it wasn't a good way to advertise the movie. So there's just a lot of really great different segments. So yeah, that is like Andre Gower going into like a fan's house and looking at some memorabilia. There's a really great segment that's developed to the practical effects in making the monsters, and they talk about how they did not have the rights to. They initially thought they were going to get the rights to kind of build off the Universal monster makeups, like those kind of molds, and then they were told no, you can't do that, and so they had to change things around. And you see a lot of the Stan Winston's crew that worked on the films, and these guys were like 20 when they were like assigned this, and it's like, okay, you guys do the creature makeup, and you're gonna do the mummy, and you're gonna do the wolf, and like that's incredible. And they just talk about how like the creature costume was like one of the best monster costumes ever made, basically.
Steve Wang, man, he's amazing.
In the documentary, and It's really, really cool. All the behind scenes stuff is really cool. Like I said, I don't know how much is included in the special edition DVD, but yeah, I mean, it even talks about how hard it was to get on DVD. One of my favorite portions of this documentary is there's a whole segment, a wonderful segment dedicated to Brent Chalet, who played Horace, kind of his parents and his girlfriend, and it's just really, they just talk about how sad it is that he couldn't live to see the success because he would have loved it, and he just seemed like such a sweet person, and but it's really great that they dedicated a whole section to him. I love this movie, man. You get, Stephen Mott is in there, who played Sean's dad. He has some great interviews. It really just talks about like the cult and the fandom. I mean, well, cult in quotes, but the fandom of people and why this movie means so much to them. It's awesome to see, man. And one of the cool things is towards the end of this documentary, they talk about, there's some guys that are like writers, artists on one of the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series. And they talk about how this movie, it kind of, every Wednesday, these guys, they like meet and they build model kits and stuff. And they're like, this is our monster club. And watching this movie, it really, we saw people that we related to, and it's inspired them to kind of have their own monster club in real life. And this podcast, Casey, is our monster club. This is where we get to talk about horror movies and monsters and head explosions. And, I think both of us watching this movie growing up, we related to the characters and we were those characters, in a sense. And this movie has meant so much to me. And it's great to see such a wonderful documentary released on it. There's so much great footage here and great interviews, and it's sad to see Fred Dekker so conflicted with it, but I hope that he has at least found peace, that people love it as much as they do. And
at least he did it, because he didn't do the reunion we were at. Yeah.
Was he not at the reunion we were at? You sure?
I don't think he was.
Was Shane Black there?
No, definitely not. No,
because he's interviewed here too. It's just great, guys. It's just, there are a couple people that I would have liked to see an interview that weren't, and I'm not sure why they couldn't get them. Patrick's sister is interviewed briefly, but she literally has one section, like one line, really, and then that's the only time she's featured. But
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird that like Patrick and Eugene really aren't, kind of, because they're part of the squad, but they're just not here. But Duncan Regé is here. It's great. The guy that played the mummy, who I think I forget his name, but he's he's a special effects whiz, and he's featured, and it's just fantastic. It's so cool. This is just one of the coolest movie, guys. It's just, they wanted to do, their version of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which they talk about. Oh, I can't recommend this enough. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. Absolutely love this movie. One of my favorite releases of the year. Casey, you will love this. So I'm curious,
I gotta watch it.
As the documentary aficionado, how you feel. Like, I really felt like it's very well paced. It's the way they segment different things. I think works very well. It's heartwarming to see that the amount of love that this movie still gets. And
I wanted to make Zach watch it first to make sure it wouldn't make me mad or something. So
no, this is even exceeded my expectations. And Andre Gower, hats off to you, sir. Thank you for retweeting my tweet, by the way.
Dude, he's the man.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, dude, just thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, that's great. That's great. All right, you can find us on social media. I am at Lucha Gringo. Zach is at, what's your name these days? You change it all the time.
On Twitter, you can find me at Earth2Zach. That's Earth, the number 2, Zach. And you can
Once you follow him, you'll stay followed, no matter how many times he changes his name. Don't worry.
That's where I post a lot of the promos I do for the episodes. But you can also follow us at our main account, which is twitter.com/MPOSofficial, or just look up Another Miserable Podcast. Subscribe to us on our YouTube page, also Another Miserable Podcast.
Yes.
And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. A nice review on Apple Podcast, iTunes. It would really help us out. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to us, guys. Like I said, if you don't enjoy what we do, please don't leave us a review. we're nice guys.
Anything will be disregarded, because really we're making a podcast that we would listen to, and we hope that would make it that other people listen to it. But if you don't like us, there's plenty of other far shittier horror podcasts that you can be listening to.
Yeah. So we're available, like I said, everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music now, of course, YouTube. So please check us out. Also, you can follow Kris, who's not here today, but you can follow him on twitter.com/KrisPistol, KrisPistule.
He's got a couple set photos from the thing he's shooting up, so check it out. Dude, okay, so we've talked about like 7 movies, and we've given 1 or 2 good recommendations. So to all the listeners out there, you're welcome. And enjoy what you can right now in the streaming world, because there's a lot of good stuff out there. It's a lot of great stuff for rental. We're approaching the Vinegar Syndrome Black Friday, so there's going to be some secret releases. Maybe we'll talk about that next time if it's something that I want to buy.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
Yeah. Speaking of Black Friday, I'm excited, Casey, because our next episode, last year, beginning of December, we did an episode that was a horror gift guide, a horror holiday gift guide. Turned out to be one of my favorite episodes. It was kind of one we did spur of the moment because I didn't have any ideas. I was like, I'm not sure what we should do. And I was like, Casey, help me. And he was like, I got this gift guide. And I'm like, all right, why not? And it was so much fun. So next episode, this will be releasing on Black Friday. So we're giving you plenty of time to find these gifts this year. Another Miserable Podcast 2020 horror holiday gift guide will be coming out. So get excited. If you have not listened to our last one, please do, because there's plenty of great...
yeah, some of that stuff is still able to be purchased.
Yeah, a lot of it's just like great websites to check out to buy t-shirts and things like that. It'll be interesting to see how the list shapes up this year, but we're going to have awesome stuff for you. So if you're looking for something to buy for the horror fan in your life, stay tuned. Or for yourself, stay tuned, as we're going to have some awesome recommendations for you. So look forward to that. I don't know how many episodes we're going to have dedicated to new releases this year, because last year we didn't talk about any Christmas horror movies, so we have to rectify that majorly.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we did a whole episode dedicated to Christmas Carol, which was a lot of fun, but we're going to get into Christmas horror movies for sure in December, and that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll see how that goes. But until then, guys, we will see you towards the end of November. But stay safe. Please continue to wear your mask, because there is still a pandemic going on. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, day, month, Thanksgiving, because this will probably be... this will come out... The next episode will come out after Thanksgiving, so have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
And that's not cranberry sauce.
It's not cranberry sauce. Watch Blood Rage.
Watch Blood Rage. If you don't watch Blood Rage, you are a punk bitch.
Alright guys, take it easy.